For 53 years, this mystery haunted America. A man hijacked a plane, took $200,000, and jumped into a storm. He was never seen again. The FBI investigated over 800 suspects. Richard Floyd McCoy, Robert Rackstraw, hundreds more. None of them matched until 2024, when new DNA technology and a discovered parachute changed everything. This is episode 4, the final answer. For the first time ever, modern scientists are using advanced technology to finally answer the question: could D.B. Cooper have survived the jump? In 2024, they're analyzing everything: the weather that night, the altitude, the equipment, the pure physics of it all. To really understand what happened, we need to go back to that moment. November 24th, 1971, 8:13 p.m. The exact instant he leaped into the dark. So, what exactly did D.B. Cooper face when he jumped out of that plane? The conditions were beyond extreme. The Boeing 727 was cruising at an altitude of 10,000 feet. Outside, the temperature was a bone-chilling -7 degrees Celsius. That's 19 degrees Fahrenheit. On top of the freezing cold, he jumped directly into a severe rainstorm. Now, on the ground, the winds were already blowing at 15 to 20 miles per hour. But at 10,000 feet, that's a whole different story. Wind speeds can easily top 100 miles per hour. Imagine being hit by a wall of air moving that fast. Visibility: absolutely zero. It was the middle of the night, with no moon, no stars, just pure, impenetrable darkness. And what was he wearing for this ordeal? A thin business suit. No specialized jumpsuit. No helmet. No goggles for protection. To make matters even more impossible, he had 21 pounds of cash. That's almost 10 kilograms, strapped to his body. Think about it. A man in a suit, weighed down by money, leaping into a freezing, hurricane-force storm in complete blackness, miles above the rugged wilderness. It's a scenario that seems to defy survival. What happened next is a question that has baffled investigators for decades. Did he somehow make it? Or did the unforgiving night claim him and the ransom money? The evidence on the ground tells a fascinating and fragmented story. Now, let's talk about the parachute. Cooper was given 4 parachutes in total, but he chose to take only 2 of them with him. And his choice is, well, it's baffling. He selected what's known as a military NB-8, which was actually a reserve parachute. This is where the problem gets critical. This parachute was never meant to be a primary chute for a jump. Unlike a main parachute, the NB-8 had to be deployed manually. You had to physically pull the ripcord yourself at the perfect moment. Pull it too soon, and the canopy could get tangled in the wind. Pull it too late, and you get the picture. I've spoken to experienced skydivers, and they all say the same thing. Trying to deploy this kind of chute at night, in the middle of a raging storm, while tumbling through the air at high speed, is next to impossible. Cooper would have had maybe 60 seconds to get it right, in total darkness, with freezing rain and wind lashing at him. It was a gamble against incredible odds. So, what were D.B. Cooper's actual chances of surviving that jump? Well, in 2024, military parachute experts decided to find out. They ran a series of complex computer simulations, plugging in all the known variables: the weather, the altitude, the type of parachute, everything. And their results were shocking. They calculated that if, and this is a big if, the parachute deployed correctly, Cooper had about a 30% chance of just surviving the fall itself. But surviving the fall was only the first hurdle. His landing zone was a dense, unforgiving forest in the middle of a Washington winter. Imagine hitting those towering trees at over 20 miles per hour. The simulations showed a high probability of severe, life-threatening injuries, or even instant death. And what if he missed the trees and landed in the Columbia River? The water temperature was a frigid 4 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, hypothermia would set in almost immediately, and he'd be dead in less than 15 minutes. Even if he miraculously survived both the jump and the landing, he was still stranded, miles from the nearest road. When the experts tallied it all up, considering every single factor, their final conclusion was chilling. D.B. Cooper's probability of survival was less than 5%. For weeks, The FBI scoured the suspected landing zone. The terrain was brutal. We're talking dense evergreen forests covering steep mountains, deep ravines, and raging rivers. There were no trails, no signs of civilization for miles and miles. And after all that effort, they found absolutely nothing. No parachute caught in the trees, no footprints, no remains of a campfire, not even a torn piece of fabric. It was as if he just vanished into thin air. Or maybe he never even landed there at all. Then, remember in 1980, a young boy found a stack of bills from the ransom money, about $5,800. But here's the twist. It was discovered nearly 30 miles away from the suspected landing zone. So, how did it get there? Scientists have two main theories. The first is that Cooper landed in or near the Columbia River. He drowned. The money bag broke open. The second theory is that he survived, buried most of the money, but this small amount got washed away during a flood. The physical condition of the bills, though, heavily supports that first theory. They showed clear signs of being soaked in water for a very long time and were embedded with river sediment. Now, let's fast forward to November 2023. A YouTuber named Dan Green, a pilot and investigator himself, was deep in the Washington wilderness, hunting for any trace of D.B. Cooper. As he scoured a remote area, his eyes caught something unusual. Buried under decades of dirt and leaves, he found a piece of tattered fabric. It was an old parachute. When he carefully examined it, he realized it matched the description of a military surplus parachute from the 1970s, the very kind Cooper was said to have used. And the location, it was smack dab in the middle of the suspected jump zone. Grider knew he might be onto something huge. He immediately contacted the FBI. By February 2024, the Bureau was on site. FBI evidence teams meticulously excavated the area, recovering not just the parachute fragments, but also surrounding soil samples. Everything was carefully bagged and sent straight to the FBI's legendary laboratory in Quantico for analysis. After all these years, could this finally be the breakthrough? While the case sat cold for decades, a breakthrough was brewing in a place you might not expect. A forensic lab. At the very same time, investigators were hitting dead ends. Scientists were taking a fresh look at the black clip-on-tie Cooper left behind on Seat 180. Back in 1971, DNA testing was the stuff of science fiction. But fast forward to today, and the technology is almost magical. Using a cutting-edge process called touch DNA, forensic experts could now hunt for genetic material left in the microscopic skin cells Cooper shed when he handled the tie. Think about it, just by touching the fabric, he left behind a tiny, invisible breadcrumb trail. The lab went to work, carefully swabbing and analyzing the tie. And in March of this year, the results came in, lighting up a computer screen. It wasn't just one DNA profile they found, but 3 distinct genetic signatures. The first, they hoped, was Cooper's. The second belonged to the person who likely manufactured the tie, and the third came from someone who must have handled it in a store before Cooper ever bought it. The science had worked, revealing a hidden layer of history within the threads of that simple black tie. But this incredible discovery only led to a bigger, more urgent question. Whose DNA was Cooper's? To crack the case, they now had a genetic fingerprint, but they needed to find the person it belonged to. The hunt was back on, this time on a molecular level. The FBI already had DNA samples from several deceased suspects. They got Richard Floyd McCoy's DNA from his children, and for Robert Rackstraw. They collected his DNA after he passed away in 2019. They took these samples and compared them to the DNA they found on the tie. The results, they eliminated both men. McCoy was not a match. Rackstraw was not a match. In fact, the DNA didn't match any of the over 800 suspects the FBI had in their database. This pointed to one of 2 possibilities. Either D.B. Cooper was a complete unknown, someone who was never on the investigators' radar, or the DNA on that tie didn't belong to him at all, but to someone else who handled it before the hijacking. Then, in April 2024, the analysis of the parachute was finished. It was identified as a military surplus NB-8 reserve chute, the same kind given to Cooper, and it was made sometime between 1963 and 1970. But there was a big problem. The parachute showed 0 signs of ever being deployed. The ripcord was still in place. The canopy was still neatly packed. This parachute had never been used. It had clearly been buried for decades, but it was never opened. This couldn't have been Cooper's parachute. It was probably from a completely different event, or maybe just some discarded military surplus. It was another frustrating dead end. Finally, in June 2024, the FBI brought together a panel of experts. We're talking forensic scientists, parachute specialists, meteorologists, and criminal profiles. They meticulously reviewed every single piece of evidence: the DNA, the location where the money was found, the weather conditions that night, the parachute analysis, the physics of the jump. Their conclusion: D.B. Cooper most likely died on November 24th, 1971. The evidence strongly suggests he either drowned in the Columbia River or died from his injuries when he hit the ground in the forest. The money that was found back in 1980 actually supports the drowning theory. His body was likely swept away by the powerful river current or buried deep in the wilderness, never to be found. As for his identity, it remains a complete mystery. He wasn't McCoy. He wasn't Rackstraw. He wasn't any of the 800 suspects. D.B. Cooper was a ghost who managed to pull off the only unsolved hijacking in American history, and in all likelihood, paid for it with his life. So why does this case still fascinate us 53 years later? Because D.B. Cooper represents the impossible dream. The idea that one ordinary person could outsmart the system and disappear. For a moment, in 1971, he was a folk hero, someone who beat the FBI. But the truth is darker. He most likely died cold, alone, and terrified in the wilderness. His perfect crime ended in a perfect tragedy. The $200,000 he stole, worth $1.6 million today. Most of it was never found. Still out there, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, waiting to be discovered. In July 2024, the FBI officially declared the case inactive, but not closed. They will continue to accept credible new evidence. The tie remains in evidence storage. The ransom money serial numbers are still on record. If any of that money surfaces, the FBI will investigate. As for Cooper's identity, modern genealogy DNA testing offers new hope. If a relative of D.B. Cooper submits their DNA to a public database, the tie DNA could be matched. Until then, the mystery continues. Who was D.B. Cooper? We may never know. Was he a desperate man who needed money? A thrill seeker who wanted fame? A professional criminal who made one fatal mistake? Or was he simply unlucky? The truth died with him somewhere in the wilderness of Washington state. But his legend lives on. D.B. Cooper, the man who hijacked a plane, jumped into a storm, and vanished into American mythology. The only unsolved skyjacking in history. And that's how his story ends. Not with answers, but with mystery. Just the way he would have wanted it. Thank you for watching this 4-part series on D.B. Cooper. The hijacking, the jump, the suspects, and the final answer. 53 years. 800 suspects. Millions spent. One mystery. If you enjoyed this series, subscribe to our channel for more true crime mysteries. Leave a comment with your theory about what happened to D.B. Cooper. And remember, some mysteries are never meant to be solved. See you next time.